I don't see that I could bring it up again. So.
I'm at home. I couldn't make it. I got a group coming at 12. So
Okay.
maybe I'll be listening somehow.
Okay. So on the Yud Aleph, and we're in the middle of the Mishnah that said 3 categories. The Mishnah had said that yesterday's Mishnah, it said there are some things that are no remez at all. Well, okay, I got the wrong thing that's highlighted, but this is the day before. Okay. Anyway, the Mishnah said that one category of oral law that doesn't have any hint in the Torah, one has a little bit hint, and the third category has very solid drashos. So yesterday we did the first and the second category. The second category was Shabbos, chagigah, and Milos. And over there, the Gemara finds some things that are called a mountain that's hanging on a hair, because it has some kind of a remez in the Torah, but not enough to be considered a full drasha. And now the Gemara continues with the Brisa. Before we go into the third category, the Gemara brings a Brisa that adds on more to the Mishnah. This is the second category. This is what we called that it has some kind of a remez, but not a lot. A mountain hanging on a hair. So the Brisa says more than Shabbos, chagigah, and Meila, which was yesterday's Mishnah. So here it says, the Brisa says that Negoim about a Metzorah and also Olos about Tumas Meis, that's what's considered an Ohel. Also, it's in the same category that it has a little pasuk and much oral law, which would be the same, more or less, is the middle category, that there's a little remez, but it doesn't have a lot of psukim. But the Gemara says Negom has many psukim. The Gemara is the kasha on the Brisa. This was the Brisa. Let's get the Brisa highlighted at least. Negom va'olos mikra muad va'alachos merubos. That's the Brisa. And the Gemara is asking that it's not true. Negom mikra muad. Negom mikra meruba wahu. Why are you saying that the Negom only has a few psukim? Tazriya Mitzorah has very, very much psukim about it. Amra papachi kamar. So the Gemara is answering, you're right. That's not the correct gears on the Brisa. Negom mikra meruba va'alachos meruatos. You're right. The way you said it, change it around. That Negom has a lot of psukim. Mostly is open in the psukim. Olas mikra muad va'alachos merubos. Only olas means we're changing it. Negom is not like that. Only olas has few psukim about tumas ohel. If there's a corpse in a room, so then it transfers. It brings tuma in the whole room. So that's the thing that has only a few psukim. What is the Brisa telling us this information? It could be also this question which applies to the whole Mishnah. The Mishnah itself that says that there are 3 categories. Some things are a little remez, some things are in the ear, some things hanging by your hair, some things are open psukim. Why is the Mishnah telling all that for? But the Gemara does ask on the Brisa. The Gemara answers, and if you have a question about Hilchas Negom, the halachas of Mitzvah, we'll look in the psukim, because the Mishnayos don't talk about everything, because the psukim themselves talk about it. If you have a question in the halachas of all, let's look in the Mishnayos, because in the psukim you won't find so much. So that was so far Brisa that seemed to have added on more into the Mishnah. It says first Negom and all this. The Gemara says that it's really should be only all this. All this is a thing that has small psukim, a little psukim, and a lot of halacha Moshe Messina. The third category is things that the Mishnah says that are yesh mamash yismoch, that it has strong drushes, that it has what to lean on. It means that the drushes over there are pretty open. But the Gemara is going to ask that even this same thing we asked on yesterday's second category, that over there it said that there are things that are mountain hanging on a hair. The Gemara says it's open sukkim, and the Gemara found there are some things that are drushes. In each one we found some things we didn't know. I don't know. Yesterday we didn't know. Today we still don't know that. In every halacha in the Torah, you can find things that are open and some things that are besides Baruch and Ba'avir, and some things, certain particular halachas. Those are the things that are hanging on a hair, or that it's even more a drasha. So I don't know why the Mishnah finds nafka these things, but the third category said that there are some things that are considered a solid drasha, and the Gemara says it's more than a solid drasha. It's open sukkim. The first one was about dinim. Dinim is about halachas of laws of mishpatim, like Parshas Mishpatim, about damages, things like that. So the Gemara says, it's open sukkim. Which thing do we have to say that has a drasha? Even if it's a good drasha, which things are not open in the pasuk? So again, Rashi says the Gemara is going to bring some example. There might be other examples also. The Mishnah would be, for instance, the halacha of Rebbe, which is going to be halacha, which is not an open pasuk. What is that? The Tanya Rebbe Yomer, nefesh tachas nefesh. It says in the pasuk nefesh tachas nefesh that a soul for a soul means over there it's talking about if somebody was fighting and by mistake he hit a pregnant woman. So it says that if she dies, nefesh tachas nefesh. But that's a question in the Gemara. The question in the Mishnah is if that's really chayiv misa. He didn't mean to kill her. He did it. He meant to. He was aiming at one person and hit somebody else. So Rebbe says nefesh tachas nefesh is referring to Mama, that he has to pay the money for the damage that for the killing because he didn't mean to kill her. Atoma Mama nefesh. Mamash doesn't mean literally a life for a life, or does it mean that he has to pay the value? Never there's a Gzeir Shav over there where it says that if he does damage her, so then v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. It says the word v'nasata. And over there, when it says that if he did not have damages to her, just damages to the fetus, over there it says v'nasan b'flilim. It also says the word nasan. Over there, it surely means money. Malhal and momen afkan momen. There's a drasha to say that in this case where he didn't mean to kill, he was aiming for one person and he killed somebody else, so then he's not chayiv misa. And the Gemara learns that from a drasha that says Gzeir Shava and the word nasan that is referring to money, it's not referring to actual killing him. The next thing in the Mishnah was about avodos. Avoda means avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, and it says that it has very solid drushes. And the kasha is again, it's open psukim. It's not only a drushes. What is missing that it's not explicit in the pasuk? It says openly. The Gemara says there's something that's not open. It's referring to the din of halachas. We know by a karbanis there are four things that are considered avoda. That's shchita, halacha, kabbalah, halacha, and zrika. Shchita means slaughtering the animal, and kabbalah means to receive the blood in the vessel. Halacha means to take it to the mizbeach, and zrika means to throw it onto the mizbeach, throwing the blood on the mizbeach. So the Gemara says that halacha's adam is not so explicit. The fact that he's supposed to bring the blood, that's also considered an avodah, is not so explicit. The shchita, it says to slaughter, talks about, the Gemara is going to say that talks about receiving the blood also, and sprinkling it on the mizbeach, but it doesn't say openly about bringing the blood, even though we would say that it does. We would say that when it says vikrivu, that it means to bring it close. That would mean like halacha. Halacha means to bring it. But the Gemara says no, that the word vikrivu was understood to show that it means to receive the blood in the vessel, and the halacha does not say. Again, shchita does say, that's the first, and the fourth thing is sprinkling it on the mizbeach, all that it says. But there's one pasuk that says vikrivu, that's the pasuk vikrivu, and the question, what does vikrivu mean? Does it mean halacha? Does it mean zrika? And we would have expected maybe you would say that it means halacha and not zrika. It means to bring it. That's what the word vikrivu means, to bring it close. But the Gemara is going to say that it's really referring to Kabbalah, and halacha is not open in the pasuk. For that, you have to have the drasha to learn out that halacha is also considered an avoda. We're not learning in the scope of this learning. It's not going to say what's the difference if it's an avoda or not. But we'll leave that to Maseches V'lachim. But here it says that you have to know that halacha is also considered an avoda. Bringing the blood to the mizbeach is just to bringing it closer. Wherever they shechted, wherever they slaughtered, then they receive the blood. You have to take it to the mizbeach, and that's also considered an avoda. We'll get this book and we'll see what the difference is. But anyway, the Gemara says that halachas adam you wouldn't know. The Tanya v'krivu su kabbalas adam. When it says in the pasuk v'krivu that the bnei Aaron v'krivu bnei Aaron that they approach the blood, that means that they are receiving it, and you would not yet know that it means halacha. The Gemara doesn't say why we don't take the pasuk shad. Why don't you say v'krivu means halacha and does not say kabbalah? It doesn't say that in the Gemara. Tosfos explains that it's not considered a malacha chashuva. And also that since you don't have to always do it, it depends where you're shechting. If you're shechting far away, then you have to get it close to the mizbeach. If you're shechting right next to the mizbeach, then you wouldn't have to bring it close. But anyway, the Gemara takes it for granted that the pasuk V'ikrivu was talking about Kabbalah Saddam, and therefore receiving of the blood, and there's no pasuk about bringing the blood close, and therefore that has to have a drasha. And the pasuk does say the word, when it wants to talk about receiving the blood, it uses the word V'ikrivu, and V'ikrivu we would say simply, like we started suggesting, that the word V'ikrivu would mean to bring it close, not to receive it. It uses the same word V'ikriv by something else, not by the blood, by the taking the limbs of the animal to the mizbeach. Over there it uses the word V'ikriv. Over there is no Kabbalah. Over there it just means simply to bring it close. So we would have thought that the word V'ikrivu also sounds like bringing close. Why does the pasuk talk about receiving the blood in the term called V'ikriv? It's a hint that halacha is also included. The Gemara takes the word, unless I'll say it's what I think is simple, and just say what the Gemara says. The simple pshat, we would have said that reprieve only means bringing the blood. It doesn't talk about receiving the blood. But the Gemara says that doesn't mean that. The krivu means to receive the blood, but the reason why it used a strange term for receiving, it called it bringing, is to tell you that bringing is also an avoda. So that's the end of the Gemara. What did it say? That even though explicitly, what the Gemara calls explicitly, it's talking about, it only mentions about the slaughtering, the receiving. That's the Gemara's parsha to the Gemara, that it means receiving and sprinkling. There's also a remez that it also is a halacha to bring the blood closer after you receive it in the vessel. You also bring it to the mizbech, and that's also considered an avoda. So on that, the Mishnah says that it has a good drasha, the yeshlam al masha yismochu, but it's not an open pasuk. The next drasha the Gemara talks about, it says in the Mishnah taros. Yesterday when I said the Mishnah, I made a mistake. I said taros and tumas go together, but I made a mistake. The word taros in the Mishnah means how to make something tohar, not about tar and tum in general. But taros means to make something tohar, means in the mikvah. Tumah is going to be the halachas of tumah, and tar means the halachas of how do you make something tohar. So the Gemara is the kasha again. Why do you have to have a pasuk? What does the Mishnah mean to say that it has a solid drasha? It's open pasuk. Michtan ksivin. It says it openly. The Gemara says there's something that it doesn't say. How big a mikvah has to be that it doesn't say. It does say it does tell you that something has to go into the mikvah, but it doesn't say how much the mikvah has to be. So there's a drasha to tell you. It's a good drasha. It says a drasha for how big the mikvah has to be. The lo ksiva doesn't say it openly. The Tanya, the b'mayim is called b'saro. The b'mayim b'mei mikvah. The pasuk says the b'mayim. This is going to be the pasuk. The b'mayim. That means b'mayim means b'mei mikvah. Then the pasuk says es called b'saro. Mayim shekal gufa olo b'hen. That rachas b'mayim means that it should be mei mikvah, which means Rashi says that it shouldn't be drawn water, shuvin, or Taisha says that it should be gathered water, it shouldn't be flowing, or maya. But whatever the point is to say, mei mikvah means gathered water. That's one point that the Mishnah that the pasuk says. As kol b'saro, what does it mean? And what do we learn? That he should wash all of his flesh. That all of his body has to be in the mikvah at the same time. Ma'im shekal gufa olo b'hen. That it has to be enough water in the mikvah that his whole body can simultaneously be immersed in the mikvah. How much water is that? Ama alama b'rum shalosh amos. The volume of water that would be 3 cubic amos. An amma, and the height, if you have an amma by an amma, the height of 3 amos, which would mean 3 cubic amos, that's the amount of water that a regular person would be able to enter, even if a person happens to be smaller, he happens to be a small person, a boy. Also, it's not considered going into the mikvah only if it has that amount, which a regular person would be able to get his whole body in simultaneously. They say it's about, how many gallons? I have written down, I think about 87 gallons. That's the minimum size of a mikvah. According to Reb Chaim, 87.5, 331.6 liter. That's how much minimum mikvah is going to be. Of course, the mikvahs are much bigger, but this will be the minimum how one person will be able to go into that mikvah. The Shir Chachamim may mikvah b'amsa, and the Chachamim estimated that amount was considered 3 by 3 cubic amos is the volume of 40 sa. We said that what a cheshbon I just said was based on a sa. How much sa? How many liter is a sa? And they say about 8.5 liter, and times 40 comes out that amount of liters comes out to about 87.5 gallons. So that was the point that the Mishnah meant when it said that there's something about the mikvah that doesn't say openly, but it's the solid drasha. This is the solid drasha. As kol b'saro means that his whole body should be able to be immersed simultaneously, which comes out to that amount of water. The next thing it says in the Mishnah is about tumos, which means something about tumah. The tara we mentioned a second ago, but now it says that something about tumah also is a drasha, and it's a good drasha, but it's not open pasuk. And again, the Gemara asks again, isn't it open pasuk? Michtav ksivan. It says openly the things that are tamei. The Gemara is going to say there's one thing. There are many things. Rashi says there are other halachas also, but there's a certain halacha that's not open. But the drashas also are good drashas. It says in the pasuk in Parashat Shmini, I think it talks about the 8 kind of rodents that when they die they have to give off tumah. Not every rodent that dies is going to give off tumah, but there are 8 that it says. Talks about 8 kinds of shvatzim. So what is the minimum amount? Means even if it's only a piece of a sheretz, also it gives off tumah. The tumah gives us nothing to do with tumah ohel, but tumah ben maga. If you touch it, so then it becomes tumah. So how big does that piece of the sheretz have to be in order to give off tumah? So it says adasha. Adasha is the size of a lentil bean. That's the size. If you have such a piece of a sheretz, of course the sheretz is much bigger, but you have a piece of the sheretz, a foot of the mouse came off, So also it's going to be, if it's the size of Adasha, so also it's going to give off Tumah. Titania, Bohem, Yachal Bekulan, Tamad Loma Mehem, Yachal Bemiktasan, Tamad Loma Bohem. Over there, when it talks about the Tumah of Shvatzim, it says two words. One is Bohem and one is Mehem. In the Pashup Pshat, it would mean one of the Shvatzim, but the Gemara learns that Bohem means like touching the whole sheretz in its entirety, and the word Mehem means even a piece. Even a piece of it also is enough to give off Tumah. And the Gemara makes a contradiction of it. Bohem Yachal B'Kula. If it says Bohem, it means only if you touch the sheretz in its entirety, when it's whole. Tamud Lamo Mehem. No, the pasuk says Mehem, even a piece of it. Yachal B'Miktasan. So if so, then even a small piece also. Tamud Lamo Bohem. The entirety means there's a contradiction between these two words. I only tell me when you touch a sheretz, that sheretz only if you touch the whole thing or even a part. Okay, so how can you reconcile the two psukim? Only if you touch the part which has some way is considered a whole. What does that mean? Of the 8 shvatzim, the smallest one in its probably when it's first born, or I don't know how they're born in an egg, whatever it is, the beginning of its creation is the size of a dasha. A chomet, they say, is a snail. I think that's what they translate it to be. That's a snail of some sort. Maybe I'm wrong, but it says that its beginning is only the size of a lentil bean, and that's why it's considered bohem. It's considered its entirety, because at one point in its history, when it was first born, that was its size, and maybe Lena told the shvatzim that that's the minimum size that it's considered its entirety, and therefore, if you have a piece of a sheretz which came off of the dead mouse or whatever it might be of those 8 shvatzim, so if it's the size of a lentil bean, it also has tumah. He argues and says that has to be a different size, the size of a tail of a lizard. Lita is one of the 8 shvatzim over there, and the tail of it also is considered its entirety. Why is that? Because as we know that the lizard gives off its tail when it has to run away. If you catch it by its tail, you're going to just be holding the tail, and it's going to run off without it. So it has some kind of an entirety on its own, and therefore that's considered the minimum share of the Shmona Shvatzim. Rashi points out also that it wiggles around even after it's separated. Probably it's the nerve endings, and it's considered like it has still life to it, but you see it moving around. But anyway, that's a machlokas of how big the minimum size of a sheretz is. So that's what the Gemara says, even though most of the halachas does say openly in the psukim, ksivan, but there are some that is only a remez, not a remez, a good rasha, and that's what it says. This is the example of it, the minimum size of the tumah sheretz. And the last thing that the Mishnah says is arayos. Arayos also, the dinim of arayos, it says that it's yeshlam al mashe yismochu, that it has drushes. It doesn't say open psukim, but it's drushes. And the more again ask for the next time, michtav ksivan, again, that's open psukim. Why does the Mishnah say that it's only a drasha? Isn't it open psukim? Again, the Gemara is going to find something that is not an open pasuk, it's a drasha. And again, Rashi will say the whole time that there are other drashas also like that, but this is one of them. It means not all that Rashi says openly. Lo nitzrucha lebito meyanusaso. That a person who has a daughter from a woman who's not his wife means that the word anusa would mean he raped a woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter. So the daughter is considered a illicit relationship to him, even though it wasn't from his wife. Means the pasuk does talk about isha obita. The pasuk does talk about openly if a person has relations with a woman and her child, her daughter, that's considered arayos. He can't marry, he can't have union with a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her mother. But if he had a daughter not from a wife, so then it's not included in that pasuk. And you wouldn't, the loksiv, it doesn't say. And therefore you have to have a drasha in order to know that she's also considered an arayos. So a man who has a daughter from an unwed wife means that he had relations with her out of marriage. Still, the daughter is considered his daughter, and it would be considered an erva if he would have relations with that daughter.
Yeah, but that's bullshit because it's his daughter.
So you wouldn't have known it. The Gemara talks about that. It talks about a granddaughter is considered an erva, but it doesn't talk about a daughter. And the Gemara says, even though of course it's a kal v'chomer, the Gemara says ein onshe min adin. Rashi brings all this down that ein mazir min adin, ein onshe min adin, that if in order to give a punishment, it has to be open pasuk, and the kal v'chomer is not enough. So even though it does talk about a granddaughter, which is even a bigger chiddush, you wouldn't have been able to punish the punishment of whatever punishment is chayiv of skila. He wouldn't have been able to give it if it would not be open pasuk.
It's question whether you're married or you're not married. If you have
That's his daughter, right? But you might think for some reason only if it's the woman and the daughter. Isha obita. The Gemara talks about a woman. He had relations with a woman and her daughter. That's considered the arayos. And you wouldn't know about something about his daughter if it's not his wife's daughter. And And over there, the pasuk really stresses isha bita, as if the fact that he had relations with both of them, that's the problem. And here you're saying the point is that it's a daughter, but it could be not. It could be the point is that he had relations with both the mother and the daughter. That's the erva. So it talks about his own daughter. But even that it's really, we would say it's a pashut because it says even a granddaughter. It says bitcha as bas benov as bas bito. It does talk about his own, even if it's not his wife's. But that only says a granddaughter, and it doesn't say about a daughter. So you have to have a pasuk for that also. And the drasha, and that drasha is going to be what the Gemara calls a good drasha. It's the Yesh Lama Masha Yismochu, but it's not an open pasuk, and therefore that's why it's in the Mishnah over here. There is a gzeir shava, a double gzeir shava to learn out that even his own daughter, that is not his wife's daughter, also there's going to be an isser and also an onish. Rashi tells you what the psukim are, that it says by his own daughter, it uses the word Shara Hena Zima He. It says the word Hena and Zima. Hena means them. Shara Hena Zima He. That it says by his own daughter, and as his own granddaughter. It says those words, and the Gemara learns out to the halachas by these double gzeir shava, but learns out also to the halachas about his wife's daughter, as isha obita, or the woman and her mother, which is the same kind of relationship. And with the drashas, it learns out also with these gzeir shavas, it learns out a double gzeir shava to learn out that both as far as the isser goes and as far as the punishment goes, it applies to his daughter, even if she's a daughter out of marriage. And then the Gemara found all of the things that it says in the Mishnah about dinin. How to go back a second and talked about dinin, and then avoda. Dinin means choshen mishpat, the laws of monetary damages, and avoda, which meant in the base of Mikdash, we talked about. Let's get through them again. The Gemara said that the first one was to tell you that if he killed somebody without aiming for that person, so then he's not chayiv misa, he is chayiv mammon. And the second one, avoda, was to say that halacha is also considered an avoda. Tara is to tell you that the shir mikvah is that he should get all of his body simultaneously, which comes out to be 40 sa. Tumah is to say that the minimum shir of a sheretz is going to be the size of an adasha or the size of a lizard's tail. And arayis is to tell you that also there's considered arayis the daughter that was a daughter out of marriage, not from his wife. And these things are all examples of things that are not openly in the pasuk, but they are drashas, and the drashas are yesh lama masha yismochu. So the Mishnah said three categories: things that are parech ba'avir, that is mamash halach l'Moshe Messinai, or a law with no hint of the Torah at all, which the Gemara said hatoras nedarim. I got the Mishnah, the Gemara, but they went on to say that there others hold no, that there is a drasha for it. The Gemara brought 5 drashas altogether. So our Mishnah knows that they're not a drasha at all, and it's Torah Shabbat Ped, which you wouldn't have known any sint hint in the Torah. Second category was things that have a small remez, like a mountain hanging on a hair, and it said over there about Shabbos, chagigah, and Me'ilah. Each one also, the Gemara said that most of the halachas are open in the pasuk, but there are some things you also have to have remez for. And the last thing is that it's mamash drasha gemura, and that's what the Gemara says today's Gemara. And the Mishnah ends off hein gufei Torah. Hein gufei Torah. The words alone would have implied that the last category is the Ikar Torah. The last category, that's Gufei Torah. But the first 2 categories not. But the Gemara says it can't mean that. Only the last category is considered the Ikar Torah, and the first one not. If it's Halacha Moshe Messinai that has no remez in the Torah, is not just as important and significant and true as the other ones that have a drasha in the Torah. Not hein, but hein, but hein vehein. That they're all the same. That's what the Mishnah is coming to say. No difference if it has a good drasha, no difference if it has only a remez, no difference if it has no remez at all. It's all Allah Moshe Messinai. It all has the same severity and significance and truth, that they're all the word of Hashem. How did that come in? It came in because of the one thing about chagigah, Shabbos, chagigah, and Mila. Said chagigah is in the middle category. That's how it came in. That was a small connection to the Maseches chagigah. And now the next parak comes in, and that's a question: how does this come in? How does this parak going to come in? This is a famous parak. It has a lot of agadata coming up. A lot of agadata. In general, it's going to be about Kabbalah. Agadata about Kabbalah issues. We're not going to learn Kabbalah. I don't know. You have the wrong teacher. But it's issues about Kabbalah. It's good to know that this Mishnah is about the sugya of Kabbalah. Even though it doesn't say Torah Kabbalah, it talks about it. How did that come in? How did it come into Maseches chagigah? So not so clear. Some of Farshim, I thought the Archbishop brings down Meiri, that because it talked about Arayis before, the last thing we spoke about a couple of minutes ago was about Arayis. It says that Arayis is Eishlam al-Masha Yismochu, the last line, the previous page. So maybe that's why it comes in now, because it does talk about Arayis, then it goes in to other subjects about we're going to have right now Maisa Bereshis and Maisa Merkava. Just to highlight all that, there's going to be Arayas, and then there's going to be Maisa Bereshis, and then there's going to be Maisa Merkava. So the mission starts. I'm sorry that I had all this highlighted, but by much more detailed, but it seemed, I think I might have erased it by mistake right before we started. The mission starts, you can't teach the halacha, it seems, the halachas of Arayis. We'll get more to the Gemara, but just to read it simply, that you can't teach the halachas of illicit relationships with three people, which you have to have a small group when you're teaching. And the Gemara is going to say why. And also, what does it mean by Arayis? And what does it mean Bishlosha? The simple mean that the Gemara takes initially, when it says Bishlosha, that it can't be a group of three. It means it has to be the Rebbe and one. Because if you're going to have a Rebbe and two, that's going to be three. So that's what the Gemara thinks. But the Gemara is going to fall off of it. But that's the initial thing. Rashi over here says, as we come to the Mishnah, you can't have two students and the Rebbe. It has to be only one Talmud. That's what we might think. You can't teach Ma'aseh Bereshis with two. What does that mean? It can't be the Rebbe and even a Talmud. What does that have to be? He has to learn it by himself. Is that right? 1 second. Rashi says, Echad v'hu. And then, the Lo b'Markava b'Yochid, which would mean that you can't learn the Ma'aseh Merkava at all. That's what it would mean. The Gemara is going to change all that. They can't mean that. The way we read it so far means you have to teach Arayis only to one Talmud, and Ma'aseh Bereshis only by yourself, and Markava not to learn at all. But the Gemara is going to say it doesn't mean that. What does it mean exactly? Arayis will say it means the halachas of Arayis, and Ma'aseh Bereshis, which means the Parshas Bereshis, where it talks about Hashem created the world, and the first part of Ma'aseh Bereshis, not the ones till Sheni about when it says the 7 days of creation, 6 days of creation plus Shabbos. And Merkava means the chariot, which is the beginning of Yecheskel, the first paragraph in Yecheskel, where it talks about what Yecheskel saw in the heavenly vision, that he saw something about Hashem with the Chayes HaKodesh and the Ofanim. So those are the three categories. It says how many people could be learning it. The last thing it says, he could learn it if this Yachid could learn it if he's wise and could understand on his own. Means with a little bit hint, he understands what the concept is. That you don't have to explain it to him or to himself, whatever the Yachid means. Period. That's the first halacha, that there are three categories: Arayis, Ma'aseh Bereshis, Ma'aseh Merkava, and as you go on, it gets more and more severe. You have to teach it to less people. The Mishnah continues, Kala Mistakel, Ba'abod Vorm, Rosi Lo Kilu Lo Ba Lo Malamala Malamata Balafana Malacha. There are four things that if a person contemplates about them, reflects about them, so it's better. They say the word Rasui, some have the Gesa Ra'ui, that it would have been better for him that as if he wouldn't have come to the world. It's such a terrible thing to do that it would have been better he shouldn't have been born. What are the four things? Malamala Malamata Malafana Malacha. The simple words means what's above, what's below, which would mean what's above in space, in location. What is high above, what is down below, and what is before and what is after, which might mean in time, what was before creation and what is after the world will end. So that's what it sounds, that's what it seems to say. We'll see some Gemara on that. And the next thing the Mishnah says, if somebody does not have compassion upon the honor of his master, of his maker, so it would have been better he shouldn't have come to the world. It says two things. One is if he looks into these four things: what is above, what is below, what is before, what is after. And there's another thing which the Mishnah is not so clear what it means. The Gemara is going to talk about it. What does it mean that he doesn't have compassion on the honor of his maker? So it doesn't say what that is. We have to see the Gemara for that. So the Gemara goes back to the beginning, and we said that you could initially learn when it says that you can't teach it with three. It means that altogether, sum total, can't be three people. That means you can't have a Rebbe and two students. It has to be a Rebbe and one student. But the Gemara says it doesn't fit. The end of the mission doesn't make sense when it says that Merkava, you can't teach it biyachid, means you can't even learn it by himself. But then by the way, the mission says Chacham Daito could learn. Somebody could learn it. It says Elam means somebody is learning it. So that would be a contradiction. If you learn the Mishnah means that a Merkava, not even one person can learn, but then right away it says he could learn. Amit Beresha, First it says you can't learn it at all, and then it says that if he's a chacham, he could learn it. So now the Gemara goes back. It doesn't mean that he made a mistake. When we said ein dorshin b'rais b'shlosha, doesn't mean a sum total of 3. That means he can't teach it to 3 students. How many could he teach it to? 2 students. Ma'aser b'reishis, he can't teach to 2 students. How many could he teach it to? 1 student. And Ma'aser b'merkava, he can't even teach to 1 student unless the student is chacham or maybe midaita, that he has some kind of understanding, that he's so smart that when the Rebbe says something, he understands the conclusion. Yeah, the Rebbe doesn't have to say explicitly, he could say it, but so everything changes now. The last one, you could have gone through the Mishnah, the first 2, that it means a sum total of 3, sum total of 2, but after the sum total of 1, doesn't make sense. So we go back to the beginning, that proves that it means 2, 3, to 3. And Darshan Varai is 2 or 3 people. As the Gemara is going to say, instead of the base, it should be like, will be a little lamed. And Darshan Varai is lish losha. Lo ma'aser reishis lish 9. Lo ma'aser merkava li yachid elam kein ha'yichacham me'ev midaita. That was the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara answers, Hachi kamar and Darshan Varai is lish losha. Here's the lamed. Instead of saying bish losha, it says lish losha. Before it said, we thought bish losha. Lo ma'aser merkava lish 9. Below b'merkava li yachid elam kein ha'yichacham me'ev midaita. So the whole Mishnah changes over that you can't teach Maaseh Arayis. You can't teach 2, 3 students, only to 2, and you can't teach Maaseh Bereshis to 2, only to 1, and you can't teach Maaseh Merkava to 1, only if he understands the Rashi Prakim. We say a little bit, he'll understand the rest. The Gemara goes back to the beginning of the Mishnah. Ein dorshin b'arayis b'shlosha. My time. What's the problem? Why not? We didn't say why not. Why can't you teach Arayis to 3 people? Why not? First, the Gemara tries with a pasuk, and it's not going to work, and the Gemara is going to come to a svara. What's the pasuk over here? That's the pasuk. That any man should not come close to a relation, to a relation, to uncover the private parts, the erva. So shouldn't have relations. The pasuk says ish, and they'll say maybe the branch is going to be. Is again going to mean another one. And what does it say? Lo sikrivu l'galos. Not that it means, of course, it's a drash, not a pashut pshat. It's going to mean don't even talk about it. Don't talk about the halachas of arayis when there are 3 people. Only talk to 2 people. Don't talk to 3 people. And we don't know the reason yet. But elamiyata, if that's drash is true, whenever it says ish, you're going to say that it means 2 people. It talks about when a person, he blasphemes, and it says what the punishment is. Over there also it says ish. The pashut pshat means any man, but they're going to say that it means 2 men, or the other pasuk ish when it talks about if a person does avodah zarah, like some kind of an avodah zarah ritual of giving his child to the molech. Are you going to say also, since it says ish, so it means only if there are 2? Achinami that it means 2 men. Oh, it's only going to be considered an aver when it's 2. That's not true. And so why does it say ish? The reason why it says ish is for a drush. It means even on, of course, on the pshat level, that doesn't mean that. But even on the drush level, it doesn't mean that. It just means that to include that goyim are also included in avera. Since it says ish over there about which one is it? Ki for blasphemy. So that's called Berachas Hashem. The blessing of Hashem, which means the opposite, that says it in a euphemism because it doesn't want to say the word to curse. So over there, even a goy is also included. That's why it's one of the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, that even a goy also has the avera of cursing to God. And also about avodah zarah, the goy is also commanded. One of the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is going to be avodah zarah. So that's why you have to have ish. If so, here also the rayas that it says ish. You can't learn out this new drasha that it means 2 people and share b'sor is another 3rd one. It just means to tell you that a guy is also included in the avera of arayas. Hainami miboyle. The first one line, the Rabbi says, is coming to teach you that Goyim also included. The 3 places that the Gemara found, ish, is coming to say that a Goy is also included. So there's no source yet to say that you should only learn with 2 people, not with 3 people. So the Gemara tries another drasha. Maybe because by Arayis it says you should guard my guard. And the Gemara sees that there's maybe room to darshan about 3. Ushmartem would be 2. That's plural. So you, plural, should guard. Mishmarati, my guarding, which means again something has to be guarded. Altogether chad, that's another one. Altogether 3. And then on that it says the V'lti Asos. Then the pasuk says on that, Levilti asos mechukosa toevos. If you say this pasuk, sorry about that. I didn't mean the L over there, but it says ushmartem es mishmarti, ushmartem es chukosai. Levilti asos mechukosa toevos eila. So if you're going to say that, don't do it. Levilti asos, don't do that. Don't teach it when you have three people. If that'll be the drash, ushmartem is plural. I'm sorry, I didn't. I underlined. Okay, my highlighting is not going well now. I meant this one. Ushmartem is mishmarti. Ushmartem would be two. Mishmarti would be one. And then it says, don't do that. And there will be a source on a drash level to say that you're not supposed to teach a rise to three people. Elamayat, if that would be true, ushmartem es hashabas, or it says ushmartem es matzos, or it says ushmartem es mishmeres hakodesh. Whenever it says the word ushmartem, you're going to say two people. When it says ushmartem es hashabas, something to do with two, plural, or ushmartem es matzos, to guard the matzos, anything to do with two. Ushmartem es mishmeres hakodesh. All these things that have anything to do with two. So that's not a good source either. So we're still looking. What's the source that all this is off now? So what's the source that you're not supposed to teach arayas to three people, only to two people? Where does it come from? So the Gemara goes back and it says this for Ella Amar Ravashi, my endorsing Barayas Beshlosha, endorsing Besisri Arayas. That it means the ones that the Sisri Arayas, Rashi explains that it means the Arayas that it doesn't say openly in the pasuk. If it's open in the pasuk, you could teach it and not only create a Torah in the shul, but you could teach it also to a big group. There's no problem if it's open in the pasuk. But if it's Sisri Arayas, which more is it maybe means something about the things that it doesn't say openly in the pasuk, it's a drash to say that it's asr. We don't want that there should be a big audience because maybe not everybody's going to be listening. My time up. Why is it not proper to teach these ambiguous arayas when you have three people? Svarahu, it's a svara, not a pasuk. It's a svara that the Chazal made a takana not to teach it to a big group. Why is that? If there are three people altogether, there are three students. So, I'm sorry, start with two students. If there are two students, then it's safe. Because even if one of them has a question, so he's talking to the Rebbe, the other student doesn't have anybody to talk to. So that's good, that's safe. He'll listen about the talking about, he'll learn something. It seems like he's going to be listening to them. I'm not learning something, I take it back. He'll be listening in. If there are two students and one has a question, speaking to the Rebbe, the other one is going to listen also. He has nobody to talk to. But plus, if there are three students, if there's going to be a discussion with the Rebbe, one of the Talmidim, the other two are going to talk to each other, and they're going to miss out what's being said. Then the Rebbe will be talking to one of the students, and the other two will be talking to each other. They might come a rabbi. They're not going to know what the Rebbe said. What's going to happen? What's terrible? But also the Mishri Yisura Barais, they're going to make some heter mistake. They're not going to hear what the Rebbe said, and he might have said something about it. Isra and Arais. When we're learning the halachos of Arais, we're very careful that everybody should be attentive. Nobody should be thinking that he knows what's being said, and really he doesn't. And the Gemara says, if so, there should be a problem in the whole Torah. Not only the Shabbos also, you should be concerned that maybe if you have three Talmidim, then one will be talking to the Rebbe, and the other two will talk amongst themselves. Yachi kol Torah nami, you should be scared of that. The Gemara says, no, Arais is especially dangerous. Arais shani, shadam amar, kezel Arais, nafshu mishchamdasan, b'chamadatan, u'misam. That a person has a desire, a lust for Gezel and Arais. Gezel is the thievery, and Arais, illicit relations. So since there's a special chemda, special delight and desire for Arais over there's more reason he might make a mistake. He's interested in making mistakes. So if he doesn't have if the Rebbe doesn't have the full attention, the student might make some heter, be more heter, think that it's mutter. But the Gemara says, okay, that's the reason why Arais, but also Gezel. You tell me, Gezel Arais. Gezel's even first over here. People want money, so maybe if maybe money matters, you only should be allowed to teach the three students, not the two. Yachi Gezel Nami. The Gemara says no, that Arais even has a different aspect of lust that money doesn't have. Arais, vein b'fan of ben shalom b'fan of nafesh yitzrei. A person has a big Yetzirah for Arais, even if the woman is not in front of him. But Gezel, and therefore, when he's learning the halacha, he might make a mistake over there also, and permit something which is really yasser if the Rebbe doesn't have the full attention. But Gezel, b'fan of nafesh yitzrei, shalom b'fan of lo nafesh yitzrei. When he has the opportunity to steal the money, that's when he gets aroused and he gets the inclination to steal. But when he's not, when he's in the base medrash, he doesn't have the Yetzirah. So it's safe. It's safe to teach halachas and monetary laws, even if there are a lot of students. And we're not choshesh anyone's going to make a mistake by not listening. But if it's a question of Arais, then people, they're more apt to want to make a heter. And if they didn't hear explicitly what the Rebbe said, they might come to make an heter. That's why they made a takana not to teach these secretive arayos. What does it mean secretive? That it's not open pasuk, and you shouldn't come to make a mistake. The next thing, the Gemara is coming up now for a couple of daf now, has a lot of esoteric ideas, and I don't know the explanation of them, and we're just going to learn the psukim, the Gemaras, and whatever we get out of it, we have to chazar 40 times to know it, and one day we'll know what it's all about. But the one thing it is going to say that there is such a subject called Sisrei Torah. There are secrets of the Torah, Kabbalah, and Bez Hashem we should know one day. If not in this world, then the world to come. The Lo b'Ma'aseh Bereishis b'Shnayim. So Ma'aseh Bereishis, you could learn that Ma'aseh Bereishis means the days of creation. It probably also, Ma'aseh Bereishis also means Kabbalah, but it doesn't say, the Gemara doesn't say explicitly, but it says about the days of creation, the 6 days of creation, also don't teach it to 2 people, only to 1 person. The Gemara is not going to say a reason, the Gemara is just going to say a pasuk. Not immediately, how do you know you're not supposed to teach Ma'aseh Bereishis to 2 people, only to 1? The Tanu Rabbana, we learned in the Brisa, Kisha Alna, this is the pasuk over here. Kisha Alna liyamim rishonim. That's a pasuk. Now the pasuk is talking about. Go ask about the history. Asher Yulu Fanecha, from the day that man was created. Did it ever happen such a thing? But the Gemara is nothing to do with whatever it's talking about over there. Shalna liyamim rishonim. If you want to talk about yamim rishonim, the days of creation, so sha'al means ask, but it's a singular. It doesn't say sha'alu. It doesn't say in plural. Ask. It says in singular ask. What does that mean? That only 1 person at a time. Yachid shol ve'ein shnayim sholin. That only 1 person should talk about it. You don't have two disciples. Only 1 disciple asking the questions. That's the first halach of the Brisa. That's the source of what we said. It doesn't say the reason. It just says kacha. That's the way it is. When you teach Ma'aseh Bereishis, it has to be only 1 student. The Brisa continues. Yachol yishal adam kodem shnibra ha'olam. That's what the Mishnah continues about. Just go scroll back to the Mishnah a second. That it says also that you're not supposed to teach or learn, then it's better, he shouldn't have been born, what's above, what's below, what's before, what's after. So that's what the Brisa continues to bring a source for that also. We just brought a source so far that Ma'aseh Bereishis is not supposed to be taught with 2 people, because it doesn't say Sha'alu, it says Sha'al, and now the Gemara is going to bring it, the Brisa is going to bring a source that it says in the Mishnah that you're not supposed to ask these 4 questions. What is above, what's below, what's before, what's after. You might think that a person is allowed to investigate and contemplate and reflect what was before the world was created. That's the continuation of the pasuk. Over there it says, ask from the day that man was created on the earth. So you see, you're not supposed to ask before that. But the Gemara says that, the Brisa says that that's even a little bit too much. It says you're not supposed to even ask only from the day the man was created. Man was created on the 6th day. So are you allowed to talk about the first 5 days of creation? Maybe they'll not speak about the 6 days, only from the 6th day and on, when man was created. I'm sorry over there. I didn't mean to do all that. Let's try it again. That it has some kind of implication that you could speak about the days that are earlier, that were that they were before man. So what is that? The 6th day, the 5 days before the 6th day, you are allowed to talk about also. So here we have so far a source that all these things only can be spoken about to 1 person, Sha'al, only 1 person. What could he speak about? From the days of creation, not only from the days of Adam Rishon's creation, even the days before. You might think that you're allowed to go even before, to speak about even before that. From the edge of the heaven till the edge of the heaven. That means that will take maybe one shot. Maybe the Gemara just means as far as space. As far as space means what is and on top and at bottom. You can't go higher than that. You can't go higher than the world. Only stay within the when you're reflecting and contemplating and thinking and investigating. Only what's in the confines of the heavens, not past that. That's the end of the Gemara. That's the end of the Brisa. Just a little bit further, the Gemara asks on the top of the next page, if you talk about it, you already said that you're not allowed to talk about things that are outside of this world. So then the issue about before the world and after the world, also you don't have to, you don't need a pasuk for that, because if you're only talking about the confines of the world, so obviously you're only talking about things that were within the time limit that the world was created. Means if you talk about, there are 2 points, location and time. But if we already said that you can't speak about things that are outside of the world, so obviously only talking about within the time that the world was created, because before that, if you're talking about creation only, so then you're not talking about things that were before and after. So the Gemara says that then you don't need a pasuk, you don't need all these psukim, and the Gemara is going to go further tomorrow to explain what you have the other pasuk for also. It means the first pasuk the Gemara said, as this pasuk is the min hayom, is talking about time. The pasuk says the Miksei Shemaim is talking about place. But if you're already limited in the place, you only can talk about things that were in the confines of the world, within the heavens. So then there's no reason to talk about to have to exclude that you can't talk about things that were before time of the world. So I think Gemara is going to continue with a new drasha tomorrow. That's the daf for today. Just to go back and summarize what we said. The end of the previous paragraph was talking about the things that have no hint at all, a hint in the Torah, or things that are a drasha, call it Torah Shabbat Peh, completely oral law. And then after that, you also have a remez, a hint. Then after that, you have a drasha that's considered a good, solid drasha. And first, the Gemara brought a brayso of Negom and Ohlus. It came out that it means that Ohlus, laws about the tent, the ohel that is over the mace that spreads tumah, that's not so beferish, and that's mostly halachah. That's mostly going to be halachos. Halachah Moshe Messina not having psukim. If you have a question over there, go to the halachas, look in the mishnayos, don't look in the psukim. Negoim has a lot of psukim over there. You can look in the psukim more than in the mishnayos. Then I had a list of things in the Mishnah that are a good drasha, but it's not open. And the Gemara looks for those things. By Dinim, it said the halacha of killing somebody without aiming for him, that it's not chayiv misa. Avoda is that halacha is also considered a avoda. Taking the blood is also considered an avoda. Taras, the Gemara learned out the shir mikvah is going to be 40 so that a person could immerse himself simultaneously, the whole body. Tmeis is to tell you that the shir, minimum shir b'sheretz, is the size that the minimum size of its entirety would either be the size of a lentil, and Rabbi Yehuda says the size of the tail of a lizard. Arayis is coming to tell you that even Bitul Man and Sasa, not from his wife, was also considered an erva, also for the punishment. And the last thing it says everything is the same. Torah, they all have the same chashivas of Torah, even if it's only Poriach Ba'avir, and it has no remez at all. This halacha of the first halacha of the Mishnah says that you're not supposed to, after Gemara finishes, it means you can't teach Arayis to 3, only to 2. You can't teach Ma'aser Bereishis to 2, only to 1. You can't teach Ma'aser Merkava to 1, only if he understands by himself. If you say a little bit, he'll be able to understand the rest. Then it says, if someone tries to reflect and contemplate about what's above, below, before, after, say little better, he shouldn't have been created. And the last part of the mission we don't know yet, that if he doesn't have pity on his master's honor, so he shouldn't have been created. We'll see more what that means. The first thing we just figured out what we said, that it doesn't mean some total of 3, but it means not to teach the three disciples. The Gemara tries to figure out why not. What's the problem? First, the Gemara tries drashas about ish, and the Gemara says no. That's going to say that a goy is also included, just like we find that a goy is included in the halachas of Birchas Hashem and Avodah Zarah, also in the halacha of Arayis and Ushmartam. Also, the Gemara says that doesn't mean anything about a plural. So the Gemara says that as far as we talk about Sisri Arayis, things that are not openly in the pasuk. And there might be room for mistake. And over there, we want to make sure that the Talmidim are all listening to the Rebbe. And if you have more than 2 students, if you have 3 students, when one of the students is asking the Rebbe a question, it could be the other 2 will discuss among themselves and they miss something that the Rebbe says. A rice is very dangerous, that a person has a lust for it, even when the rice is not in front of him. So therefore, we want to make sure he shouldn't come to be more het or anything. Other halachas, we can trust that they'll listen or they won't, because they don't have any incentive that they'd want to make a heter. Even Gezel, it's only when the money's in front of him, then he might have a lust to take the money, but not when it's not in front of him. And the Mishmedrash, he's honest in the Mishmedrash. So therefore, we don't have any chance, and he can teach it to a lot of students, but Sisri Arai is not to teach to many students. The other pshatim besides what we said, we spoke about the Sisri Arai means the laws that doesn't say openly in the pasuk, like top of the page, it said about the Abidim Manusasa, but the others say different shatim Sisri Arai means something. Also, maybe the reasons, maybe Kabbalistic. I'm not sure. The Gemara continues by Ma'aser Bereishis that we just did a little bit by Ma'aser Bereishis, that it brings the source without a reason, because it says Sha'al, doesn't say Sha'alu, that's in singular. And what are you allowed to talk about from the day of creation, not only from Adam Arishon, Asher Bara Elohim, but also from the days of creation also. At the end, the Gemara comes out that the pasuk is going to be that since it says you're only allowed to talk about creation and not above and below, so then by default, you're also always going to have to be talking about within the time of creation, if you're talking about the creation itself. So the Gemara is going to go continue tomorrow to say why we need the first pasuk. The first pasuk at this point is superfluous. We don't need the pasuk of the Min Hayom. because we have the pasuk of the Miksei Shemayim, but Miksei Shemayim, that means that only within the confines of the earth, which includes the heavens also, but not past that. So you can't talk about outside the confines of this world. This world, I don't think it means outer space. Outer space also is considered this world. The Shemayim it includes all of the galaxies. So whatever is beyond that, I don't know what that means. Of that you're not supposed to be learning about. Yashikach, everybody. We'll be back in about 8 minutes to continue with Pirkei Avos. Yashikach. Thank you.
Rebbe,
Thank you very much.